Let's talk about Moses. The American colonists knew their Greek democracy and they knew their Roman Republic. They also knew their Bible. They knew it as well as we know Harry Potter. They had favorite characters. You could go to some group of schmoes in Connecticut and say, hey, do you remember that time where Moses told the people of Israel, choose your own leaders from amongst yourselves, in groups of 10 and 50 and 100 and 1,000 and at the tribal level for the 12 tribes of Israel. And they'd say, oh, sure, I remember that. We read it around the dinner table. Well, whether or not there was that proto-democracy and what it was actually like, we don't have a tablet or archaeological, confirmation. So believers can say, I believe it, and non-believers can say, well, I don't believe it. But we all believe that there is a Connecticut. And in Connecticut, when they were founding it, they opened up this book. And they read this passage. Moses says, choose your leader. The people choose their leaders from amongst themselves. That's the significance of Moses. That should be in our textbooks. Not some, you should be able to go to a school kid, any school kid in America, and say, what's the significance of Moses to democracy? And they should be able to, not because of emotions, not because of feelings, not because of Sunday school or synagogue, not because of the Ten Commandments or faith. They should say, it is because this man once said, the people should choose their own leaders from amongst themselves. Other things are for the world history textbook. Other things are for Sunday school and synagogue. This is for the textbook. I would put it forward that probably most of us in this room didn't have that in our textbooks. It's an important part of American history. It's the soil that the founders grew up in. Thank you.
That's very interesting. I was not aware of the fact that was a specific reference to Moses in the creation of the state of Connecticut. But what I want to know is, was that also used in any other state, that particular comment that we're doing this because this was what Moses said, choose the leader?
As far as I know, the only historical record we have is in connection with Connecticut. They didn't mention Greek or Roman, Greek democracy or Roman Republic. They did specifically mention this. That was in 1638. The deal is that, as far as I know, I'm not aware of any other colonial mention in any kind of official papers, but the fundamental orders of Connecticut were a template for the rest of the colonies. They were one of the first ones, and so every colonial charter that came after that reflected that colonial idea. And of course, this is not just from they weren't the first people to open up the book and get the light bulb right on the day of their founding orders. This is a well-known doctrine that goes back to John Calvin, and it was very, very, very well-known and kind of baked into their ideas at that point.
Well, I thank you for bringing that, because I was not aware of the fundamental orders of Connecticut connecting to that so directly.
Every kid should be.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask the gentleman a question, because as we assemble our work groups and they make recommendations, and we also look to them to give us guidance, the work groups recommended the removal of Moses, and they saw it as problematic. So when you were giving your testimony, you spoke, and I'm gonna try to bring it back, and you can remind me, of believers and non-believers. So is it down to people who may not believe, that don't accept these things from Moses? Or, because I didn't see it in that context, I'm looking at them from a historical standpoint, what's correct, what's good for children, and they believe that including Moses in the curriculum is problematic if there's not a central theme for why we're doing it.
You're right on track with that. I'll expose my biases here. I'm a lifelong staunch Baptist, which means I believe in the firm separation of church and state. Baptists are always the ones getting beheaded by whoever was in charge of the state religion. So we don't like state religion, and we don't like establishment. What we like is for true history to be taught. And so this is when a non-believer can say, well, maybe there was no Moses, there's no God. But that same non-believer can look and say, well, there is a Connecticut. And that, the question isn't, did this stuff really happen? A believer will say, well, of course it happened. All right. A non-believer will say, well, it might not have happened. The question is, what gave the colonists their ideas? Where did they come up with this idea of the people choosing their own leaders? This, among other things, of course, there's the Greek democracy, of course, there's the Roman Republic, there is the almost never mentioned Iroquois Confederacy, which I encourage everyone to look up. It's fantastic, and they all knew about it. Ben Franklin was very, very enamored of them, and we take some of their ideas directly from them. They should be in the textbooks too. But whether or not you believe in Moses or the Ten Commandments or any of that is a secondary question. That's for Sunday school and synagogue and midrash. For the public school history classroom, the history of this founding is they looked to this for their template of, hey, let's create these concentric circles of jurisdiction where the people choose their own leaders.
Any other questions?